2010. Muslims force pool cover-up. Town hall chiefs were yesterday accused of political correctness gone stark raving mad for forcing pool users to swim in the gloom to protect Muslim women's modesty.
This is Darlaston Leisure Centre in the West Midlands, a big glass building with a swimming pool and gym. And 6 months ago, Walsall Council here put up a translucent film, a sort of like frosted glass but made of a thickish cellophane, on the lower windows of the pool to prevent people outside from looking in. The Express story of the gloom of the now darkened swimming pool in the West Midlands was also covered in other newspapers and later even parodied by John Finnemore and Laura Shavin in Radio 4's The Now Show.
It is genuinely bad enough that all that natural light has been blocked out, as we can be sure that it has, because the Mail and the Mirror both said
all 250 windows had been blacked out.
Those pesky Muslims, that lunatic council, making old ladies swim in the dark. It goes on to explain how the council
covered ground-level windows with opaque film.
Honestly, these councils, if they just... Sorry, hang on. Ground floor windows? Opaque film? Is that the same as blacked out? Can you clarify, Daily Express?
Regular users of the pool are furious that the tinted windows...
Tinted? The ground floor windows have been tinted? Isn't that what all swimming pools with ground floor windows do? It doesn't sound quite the same as Muslims forcing grannies to swim in the dark. I mean, I'm assuming that it was at least those uppity Muslims that made it happen, right?
The complaints had come mostly from the Muslim community, but non-Muslim women had also objected.
Right. So this fiendish and indefensible window tinting was done after complaints from Muslims and non-Muslims. Or to put it another way, people.
Walsall Council's statement made it perfectly clear that only 58 of the pool's 250 windows had been covered in the translucent film, which had been installed for the benefit of all swimmers because, according to the council, and I quote, not everyone is confident in their Speedos. Professor Justin Lewis from Cardiff University School of Journalism has analysed coverage of Muslims in the print media from 2000 to 2008 and has continued to monitor how Muslims are portrayed in the press ever since.
The ways in which Muslims are discussed or talked about in the press tend to be in contexts that clearly are rather negative. So it's terrorism, it's about the clash between Christianity and Islam, it's about Islam as an extreme religion. And none of those things, I think, would be things that more moderate Muslims would be very happy with as a form of representation. What we don't see, I suppose, is Islam or Muslims represented in ordinary day-to-day sorts of ways. It's nearly always linked to those three kinds of stories.
And how many negative stories, as it were, outweighed the positive ones?
By quite a lot. We looked at stories that, what are the sort of most prominent lines of argument that you get in a particular story. And so, for example, 34% of stories we found Muslims were specifically linked to the threat of terrorism. 26% of stories suggested that Islam was either dangerous, backward or irrational. Now, there were stories, 17% of stories talked about Islam as part of a multicultural society, but it's clearly a much smaller number. And, the next biggest idea that we found in stories was the idea of the clash of civilizations between Islam and the West. 14% of stories, 9% talked about Islam as a threat to the British way of life. So the negative stories very clearly outweighed the positive stories by some degree.
Perhaps the most potent and certainly long-standing example of the clash of civilization reporting is found in the concept called Winterval. Some councils are accused of bowing to Muslim pressure to downplay the Christian festival of Christmas in favour of what is portrayed as a theologically neutral Winterval. Every year, stories are written about councils and other public organisations banning Christmas. Last autumn, the self-styled English Defence League slogan "No Surrender to Militant Islam" wrote to more than 300 councils, warning that thousands of its members would march on any towns which changed the name of Christmas. The EDL calls itself a human rights organisation. Its opponents describe it as an extreme right-wing group. But blogger Kevin Arscott, who has written extensively about Winterval, says these alternative events were never designed to replace Christmas. He says this whole myth dates back to 1997, when Birmingham City Council's marketing department was run by a man called Mike Chubb.
Him and his team are given the task of creating a marketing strategy to cover a range of events, starting with BBC Children in Need, Christmas light switch on a Frankfurt Christmas market, an outdoor ice rink, all the various different sites right way through the new year. So what Mike Chubb came up with was a label under which all the individual events could sit, and that label was Winterville, sort of an amalgamation of just winter and festival, really.
And was there any suggestion that Christmas was being left out?
Absolutely none whatsoever. The banner saying Merry Christmas across the front of the council house was the same as ever before. The Christmas lights, Christmas trees, carol singing sessions, school choirs. Christmas was exactly the same as it always had been in Birmingham. There was absolutely no change whatsoever.
That did all change, though, a year later, when Mark Santer, the then Bishop of Birmingham, wrote his annual Christmas message to local clergy, which was later picked up and republished by the city's newspaper.
The council seemed to be promoting this strange thing called Winterville, and it frankly made me laugh out loud. And that's what I wrote to the clergy. I mean, I did it in a fairly light-hearted way, and it obviously plugged into something that people were fed up with, this sort of suppression, as it seemed to them, of Christmas, and its replacement by this weird newly invented thing called Winterville. I really wanted to say, look, what we're celebrating is Christmas.
And you thought they were trying to downplay it?
I think they were trying to sort of homogenise it with a general sort of winter commercial festival.
Bishop Santer's remarks were then followed up by many national newspapers, most adopting the tone that political correctness was behind an effort to replace Christmas with a secular festival. It has remained that way ever since. Denials that Christmas is being removed or even undermined, issued by councils, are usually relegated to the end of any article, beyond the booming headlines. However, when I caught up with the English Defence League's leader, Tommy Robinson, real name Stephen Lennon, he was adamant that Christmas is under very real threat. So why hadn't the EDL carried out its promise to march en masse on councils which banned it?
None of them banned it this year. We sent letters to 369 councils. How many changed the name of Christmas? Last year, 9 did. Within a year, we've got the power to tell them you're not doing that.
Which 9 banned Christmas?
Watch now, not banned. They changed the name, Winter Festival, things like this.
But every one of those councils would say Christmas was never banned. Christmas became part of a greater festival.
No, but it didn't become part of a greater festival. It's hijacking. Christmas is one of the most important days in the Christian calendar. They are hijacking our Christmas event by changing the name. OK, let's change the name of Eid. Let's not call it Eid. Let's not put Eid lights up. Let's not dare say the word Eid, and let's see the backlash across this country.
Back in Birmingham, Bishop Santer is sorry, he says, to hear that his message from 13 years ago is today being exploited by groups like the EDL.
I don't think that Muslims or any other faith group were alienated by Christians saying, "Hoi, this is Christmas." What they have perhaps been alienated, I'm sure they have, some of them have, is by the way this thing has been hijacked. And I would denounce that as much as anyone would.
God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Last September saw Pope Benedict XVI's historic visit to Britain, a perfect opportunity for Christians to celebrate their devotion. But then came this Daily Express headline on September 18th.
Muslim plot to kill Pope. Islamic terrorists disguised as street cleaners allegedly hatched an audacious plot to blow up the Pope. The threatened attack was foiled at the 11th hour. It is feared plotters with links to Al-Qaeda planned a double blow to the infidel by assassinating the head of the Roman Catholic Church and slaughtering hundreds of pilgrims and well-wishers.
There was, in fact, no Muslim plot to kill the Pope or slaughter pilgrims. Within 24 hours, the police, who'd arrested 6 council cleaners in Westminster after a tip-off, released them all again, saying they posed no credible threat. As with the non-existent Coronation Street plot we heard about at the start of the programme, Muslims were dramatically but incorrectly accused of being extremists. Inayat Banglawala, who's been wrongly accused of being an extremist himself by the Daily Express, is not in the least bit surprised.
Increasingly, newspapers are jumping the gun and gleefully almost reporting that another Muslim plot has been uncovered and it was those sinister Muslims behind it once again. It's almost as if they don't care, provided they can shift newspapers on the back of prejudice against Muslims, all's fair.
Neither the Daily Mail, Telegraph, Star or Sun wished to appear on the programme today, and the editor of The Express was simply too busy. Not working with the Press Complaints Commission, obviously, because, as we've said, the Express Group has withdrawn from the PCC, and withdrawn, therefore, from its code of practice, which forbids publication of inaccurate, misleading or distorted information, and also states that prejudicial or pejorative reference to an individual's race, colour or religion must be avoided unless genuinely relevant. The PCC's job, in other words, to monitor the sorts of stories about Muslims that generate either genuine concern or genuine interest from others that are just baseless. But with a major sector of the press opting out of PCC regulation, where does that leave, for example, the non-existent Pope plot, which attracted many complaints to the PCC about how it was reported in the Express? Or there's the Stoke-on-Trent story, again in the Express, of the schools forced to accommodate Muslims and their fasting, only there was no such diktat. A question for the Commission's director, Stephen Abel.
With the Express case, we didn't actually reach a decision on that case. We weren't able to in the end.
Because Mr. Desmond withdrew from your organisation.
And that was the moment, and that was a timing issue to do with that. I mean...
Well, that's not very helpful, is it? That your organisation, which rules on these things, can't rule on this because this man, Mr. Desmond, and his newspapers, The Express and The Star, has taken his bat away.
Well, I agree. It's a situation that we hope will be resolved as soon as possible. I understand that.
Well, you say you can be and like to be proactive. I have just told you exactly where this was inaccurate. No one was forced, and there was no such thing as a diktat. Are you going to undertake, when you go back now, to have another look at this?
We could even look to communicating with Stoke ourselves. No, if there's an issue there, we can certainly look to contact Stoke ourselves.
So what does it mean for readers who find the coverage of the Daily or the Sunday Express or the Daily or the Sunday Star is breaching the code? What does that mean for people who want to complain about that?
We will still act as a way of facilitating their complaints directly with the paper. We will help the people as far as we're able to do so. And that's the position at the moment. It's a dispute about funding that we...
You're the regulator. You can't regulate these newspapers.
At this point, they are outside of our jurisdiction. I mean...
What use as a regulator are you if that's the situation?
Well, I think the issue is that we still provide a very, very good service. We have a very high satisfaction rate of people who do use us, and we still have a clearly large coverage across the printed media and online.
But is there an agenda here, putting words in like Muslim or Islam or Al-Qaeda into the most mundane of stories? Extractor fans in Stockport or swimming pool windows in Walsall, shove one of those words in and it becomes something totally else.
And I think you're focusing, and understandably so, on 2 or 3 or 4 articles here. But we recognise in the area of reporting of Islamic issues, as we recognise in other areas, that there is work for the PCC to do. Some of the issues, as I think Baroness Varsi is saying currently, it's a complicated issue to do with how society regards Islam.
But society's regard of Islam is surely informed by some of these misleading headlines and the drip effect they have.
These things are clearly interrelated, and I don't think one can necessarily say one stems 100% directly from another. But what I'm saying to you is the Commission, the PCC, regards the reporting of Islamic issues, like other issues, as an important area for us to continue to do work on. And we see that as an important thing for us to do in future as well.